Hello everyone, Squee here, and welcome to another edition of Thoughts Behind the Wheel. It is I, Behind the Wheel, on Monday, August 24th, 2015, around 6:07 p.m.-ish time. Hi, how's it going? How you guys doing? Good. I don't really have any questions to answer, believe it or not. I have one question to answer, I think, which was, what's my favorite genre of music? My favorite genre of music, oddly enough, is OSTs, original motion picture soundtracks, or trailer music. You know, epic music. Just go to YouTube, type in epic music mix, and that's pretty much my favorite kind of music. I know, it's weird, isn't it? I know. It's not generally the norm. I mean, a lot of people will say, oh yeah, I like that kind of music. But most people won't say that's what they listen to 99% of the time. I will. That's mostly what's on my phone. Soundtracks from movies or anime or trailer music. I don't know why. Just enjoy it. It's just good. I do branch out. I do enjoy pretty much every genre except for country. I think country music's the one type of music I'm not a big fan of. There's nothing against country music. There's nothing wrong with country music. I think I grew up listening to it way too much as a kid, so I have a bad aversion to it. I do enjoy old country music like Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, those kind, Merle Haggard, kind of. But for the most part, country, meh. But any other kind, rock, punk, you know what? No, that's not true. There are three types, I should say, I don't like. I don't like most country. I don't like heavy scream metal, where they're just and it's just a guitar going da, 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 because that's not music to me. That's the cacophony in my ear destroying my brain. So I'm not a big fan of that, because honestly, there's very little melody there. There's very little harmony. There's just a lot of noise and screaming. And the other one I can't stand is 1990s rap. And why I can't stand it is because, well, pretty much the same reason. There was no melody, there was no harmony. It was literally someone speaking rhythmically about things I didn't care about. Nowadays, most rap has a beat. Like, if you think of, like, today's rappers, Eminem, oh God, I'm going to sound incredibly racist if I don't come up with other people. No, like, Eminem, Ice Cube, even people like Little John and Ludacris and all them. I mean, they've got a beat, they've got a song, they've got a harmony that they rap to, and it's actually decent a lot of the time. It's usually like a hybrid. It's a cross between rapping verses and sung choruses, and that I like. But back in the 90s, when rap just first started, and I'm not talking NWA, I believe it or not, I actually like some of their songs. But no, a lot of rap was like, you could have just taken the music away because there was no reason for it to be there. It was just someone rhythmically speaking about things, and I just didn't like that. So, that's that. And then that, I mean, you know, R&B, today's common newest hits, even pop music. There's some that drive me nuts, but I mean, pop music is music that is addicting to listen to. It gets in your head and it sticks there, and you know, it's hard to really hate that kind of music. So I enjoy almost everything. I was a huge fan, I guess I still am, of System of a Down. Oh man, when I was in high school, that was my jam. And it still is. I mean, whenever I catch a System of a Down song, it's so nostalgic. Good times. But yeah, 99% of what I listen to, all you'll ever find on my phone is either audiobooks about astronomy or history, or anime, movie, and TV show soundtracks. That's about it. In fact, I'm trying to think if there's literally anything else music-wise on my phone, and I don't think there is. I really don't. So yeah, that's that answered. I've got a long drive today. Because I got to go by the house. I got to pick up my box and receipt for the power supply I bought at Fry's that's busted. Then I got to go by the computer store and pick that up. And then I got to go to Fry's and return it. So, and all of these is like a half hour away from each other. So yeah, long drive today. I don't have any questions though. You guys haven't really been posing any questions for me. You've been responding to what I've said, which is fantastic, which is great. But you guys haven't really been placing any questions, so I don't really have any questions to answer, except for the generic, like, talk about history. And that's hard, because there's so much. There's so much history. No, the problem with that is, as I've said before, I am not great at remembering names and dates, as you've noticed. Otto Octavius. Anyway, so that generally, if I don't have a specific thing, like, hey, talk about this or whatnot, I can't prepare. Like, here's what I normally do, and here's what I do for, say, whenever I'm doing an Assassin's Creed game, like when I did Assassin's Creed 3 and it involved the American Revolution. I research it. I look up several sources and I refresh my memory on the events that took place, so that when I tell you guys about the history, I've got my facts straight. So I'm not sitting there going, oh God, what was Gaius Octavian's name? Oh no, oh, was it Augusto? Mucho Gusto? Augusti? So, so I try and get my facts straight. Plus, how embarrassing would it be if I was like, in 1496, Columbus sailed the ocean blue? Wait, that doesn't sound right. So when you just say, tell me about history, I don't have anything specific to try and research on. Now, part of it too is that I know you guys don't, you just want to know about history. You don't really care if I research it too much, but I care a little bit. But hey, I've got nothing else to talk about. I really don't. I have no questions, and the only thing I've really gotten is talk about more history. And I'm not sure, like, I was thinking today as I was getting into my car, like, what parts of history do I know well enough that I could just start talking about? And here was my issue. I know a lot about Rome, but I know a lot about what happened. I don't remember almost any names and dates. And without those for context, it's really hard to talk about Rome. Because it's just going to be like, and then this guy did that thing, and it was cool, I know a lot about the Crusades. I could talk about them, but I've talked about them before too. I was trying to think of something that I haven't covered a lot. I've covered the Crusades in the Assassin's Creed Let's Play. I covered the American Revolution that I know a lot about in the Assassin's Creed Let's Play. Good God, what is it with me, history and Assassin's Creed? I know a decent amount of Japanese history, but I covered that in the Japanese, Shogun Total War. So I was like, what do I talk about? And I was like, what if I just talked about warfare in general? The history of warfare. Because I know that fairly well, and in that case, I don't have to get to remember specific dates and times. All I really have to remember is, well, how warfare developed and the different types of warfare. And man, I could go on for that about hours. So, why not? Why not? Let's give that a go, shall we? We've got a long drive ahead of us. So, the history of warfare. First, I like to point out something that oh boy, did I just blank on, hang on. No. There's an author, a military historian who I absolutely adore, and for the life of me, if you asked me at any other day, at any other time, I could tell you who it was. Right now, I can't think of his name. I'm sorry. Anyway, there's a military historian. He's British. I love him. He's a great military historian who actually breaks a lot of molds. Breaks a lot of views that people hold. Like, for example, Clausewitz. Clausewitz is a famous name for anyone who has studied strategy and tactics. Clausewitz wrote the book on war. And he is famous for pinning the phrase, war is a continuation of politics by other means. Now, technically, I think what he said was war is a continuation of policy by other means, but it's normally translated to be politics, and that's what he, meant. He wrote. I'm sorry, guys. I'm blanking because I'm still trying to remember that historian's name. It's going to drive me nuts. Anyway. He's famous. Everyone knows this saying. War is politics by other means, or a continuation of politics by other means. And what he's saying there is this. When diplomacy fails, war is another type of diplomacy. War is just diplomacy taken to the next level. And this is a false statement. It's not that Clausewitz was wrong per se. It was that he was a product of his time. And in his time, this was very much the case most of the time. But this is not a statement that can be broadly applied to war in general. And I'll go into detail on that. So, think about it this way. War is a continuation of politics by other means. This means that war, in essence, is politics, is policy, is diplomacy. It's just a very violent form of politics. That's what he's putting forth. That's what he is saying. And that's not true in all cases, in all forms of war. There are certainly wars, and a lot during his time period, the Napoleonic era, where this was absolutely the case. Countries would negotiate. I want this piece of land. Well, you can't have that piece of land. Well, but I need this piece of land. Well, no. Grr, let our fists duke it out. But when I say fist, what I mean is guns in the hands of lots of people. And in that sense, the war was fought for the betterment of the country. But here's the problem. Politics, by its definition, is acts, policies, and diplomacy that is intended to better a country, that is done to better a country. Politics, I forget the actual definition, but the definition of politics at its core is policy enacted to better a country. And that means that anything that you do that is considered politics, you are doing under the idea that succeeding at this will make your country better off than it was before. And that, by that definition, the second a policy does not embody this idea, the second you understand that whatever policy you are doing will not make your country better, it is no longer politics. It is something else. And you might say, well, but who gets into a war without thinking it's going to better their country? Well, there's several examples. Most strikingly, how about World War I? World War I was not a continuation of politics by other means in any way, shape, or form. World War I started from pride, continued from pride, and ended only when pride was crushed on every side. When World War I started, the shape of the world, or the Western world, as it were, especially in Europe, was one of absolute nationalism, absolute pride in one's nation. I am German, and the country Germany is the best country. I don't want to go into race, but we'll go with nations. We'll stick to nations. That's what it was. I am British, and Britain is the best country. I am French, and France is the best country. And we're better than all the other countries. And if we go to war, we're going to kick your ass because we understand and you don't. That's what every country felt at the time. This was, you think patriotism is a big thing today. It is nothing compared to what it was back in 1910. Patriotism was everything. Being patriotic to your country was a lifestyle. And people were just itching for a chance to show that they were right, that their country was the best country, had the best troops, had the best men and women, and ideal. And they were just itching for an opportunity to show this. At the time, every single country, now there were two main treaties. There was a treaty between Germany, Austria, Italy, I think. Germany, Austria, Italy, a couple of other countries, I forget which. And then there was a treaty between England, France, Russia, and several other smaller countries. And these treaties had, I forget the name of it, but it's basically a pact that acts like a chain reaction. You go to war with one country, then all that country and all of its allies declare war on you. Thus, you and all of your allies declare war on all the other countries that just declared war on you. So all it takes is one match and the entire continent goes up in war. And that's exactly what happened. Archduke Ferdinand, Prince of, or the Archduke of Austria, went to Serbia. And, was Serbia a country back then? Oh, God, I'm not good at my geography. I don't remember if Serbia was an actual country back then or just part of Austria that had Serbians who were not fans of Austria. Forgive me, I don't remember that part. But Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated by Serbian rebels, separatists. And, no, it was a country. Of course it was a country. What are you thinking, Squee? Who was Austria going to go to war with if there wasn't a Serbia? Itself? Because civil wars are a thing? I guess. But anyway, so Serbia was a country. Duh. So, you killed Austria's Archduke Ferdinand, and understandably, they're pissed about this. They are really, really, really pissed about this. And they want to go to war with Serbia. But Serbia happens to have a treaty with France and Russia and England. And Austria's not so hot on this. They're like, ooh, we could squash Serbia. I mean, Serbia's nothing to us. We could destroy them. Not so sure about their friends, pulling collar of shirt to let in air because it's suddenly awkward in here. But Germany's on our side. Germany's got our treaty. Hey, Germany, you're stronger than all of them, right? You got a treaty with us. If we declare war on Serbia, will you declare war with us? Because if you declare war with us, then we're confident Serbia's allies will go, whoa, okay, oh, actually, here, just take Serbia, that's fine. We don't want to get involved. And Germany was like, maybe, sure, why not? Like, really, Germany was kind of ambivalent, but kind of not. No, okay, actually, that's not true. Germany as a nation was chomping at the bit, much like most nations were. This is a weird, crazy pseudo time period where the mass populace was much more willing to go to war than the actual politicians. I know! Crazy! Twilight Zone! I know! But this was the case. A lot of the politicians on Germany's side, on Russia's side, on England and France's side, did their best to keep war from happening. You might say, well, if they did their best, how come war still happened? Well, politics is a complex thing. And a couple of missed phone calls, I kid you not, a couple of poorly choiced words, maybe an outburst at the wrong time, and war happened. I'm not going to get into the details of how World War I started without actually looking it up, because there's a lot of complexity there. You're talking about, you got to understand, the leaders of Germany were related to the leaders of Russia. I think they were like first cousins or something. They were really close. So you're talking about these like almost brothers, like, we're about to go to war. Do we really want to do this? I really don't want to do this. But of course they did go to war. And the nations were ecstatic. The nations were like, yes, finally, a chance to prove how awesome we are. This war will be licked in 4 months. Literally. Every single country had a plan of action that had the war ending in months, 6 months, less than a year, because they thought they were that good. They had timetables worked out. They had train lines mapped out. They had the entire war already planned out on a map from beginning to end of what they were confident they would do and what their enemies would do and how they would beat them. Well, didn't quite turn out that way. First, they underestimated the impact on their railroad systems. Basically, they overestimated how much they could transport, how quickly. Their timetables got a bit screwed up. But the more important thing that happened was, it was really interesting. Germany knew it couldn't fight a two-front war. It knew that it couldn't take on France and Russia at the same time, especially when England could jump in at any moment. So their plan was to hit France hard and fast and take France down. And then France is gone, and then they could turn towards Russia. Wonder why this sounds familiar. But, and they would delay Russia as long as they could. And what they planned to do, it's hard to do without a visual aid or something. What they planned to do was flank France to the north. So basically curve around to the north and come down on France and thus surprise them and go boo and take them over. Well, France kind of had the same idea. France is like, we got to take Germany out fast. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our whole army and we're going to flank to the south. And then we're going to surprise them. Oh, here we are. Surrender. So literally what you had was German forces flanking to the north and French forces flanking to the south and completely missing each other. So you had like German forces marching into an undefended France and French forces marching into an undefended Germany, which caused holy hell. Once both sides realized what the other was doing, they were just like, what? I didn't technically remove my hand from the chess piece. Can I redo the move? No? I'm going into way too much detail as it is. They got bogged down in a trench war where millions died. My whole point, my whole spiel for getting off on this is simple. At first, even if you could say that World War I at first was policy by other means, politics continued, which you're very hard-pressed to. This war really started because of national pride. It didn't start because England didn't go to war because they thought beating Germany would somehow improve England. They went to war because they thought beating Germany would prove to the world what they all knew, that they were the best. And same for France, and same for Germany, and same for Russia. There's very few of these countries, even Austria, didn't go to war with Serbia because they thought that going to war with Serbia would improve Austria. They went to war with Serbia because they were pissed. Now, politics doesn't deal in anger. Politics deals in what's best for the country. So you're hard-pressed to say that even that was politics by the means. But even if it was, even if you could make a valid argument that World War I started as politics, that has no bearing on what happened next. And what happened next was a war of attrition. A war of attrition that ground every single country involved in it in Europe to dust. It destroyed Europe. Every country suffered horribly by World War I. And the thing is, they knew this. They knew what was happening. They knew how devastating this was to their country, but they couldn't stop. They couldn't let themselves stop. And why couldn't they let themselves stop? Because if we admit defeat now, everyone who's died will have died for nothing. So we're going to push on and we're going to win. And at least then we can say that all the people we lost for a reason. And that reason was that we won. Our ideal was a better ideal. And this idea was so prevalent that every country, even though they knew that continuing this war was detrimental to their country, could not stop it. They continued fighting on pride, because if they admitted defeat, their pride would be broken, and they would feel like they entered that war and lost all those lives for nothing, which is already the case. In no way, shape, or form can you argue that that is politics by any stretch of the imagination. That war was not politics by other means. It was a war of pride. And it was a very sad and tragic, absolutely tragic event. And it's not the only example. It's just the biggest one that comes to mind. The Crusades are another really good example. The Crusades, a war called on by the Pope for many nations, many nations, to rise up in arms against the Holy Land, the Muslims in the Holy Land. And many nations answered this call on many occasions. Now, was this war designed to help the countries in any way? No! It bankrupted a lot of the countries, and they knew it was going to bankrupt them. They weren't doing the crusade to better their country. They knew this wasn't going to help. They knew that the Holy Lands were, for lack of a better term, not great lands to hold. They weren't incredibly rich. They weren't fantastic farmlands. I mean, they weren't as bad as they are today, but they weren't fantastic. They weren't worth trepping all the way across the world to go take, and losing the men and money required to do it. So it certainly wasn't politics. Well, what was it? Well, it was religion. And religion, while sometimes can get political, is in and of itself a different creature. Kings and princes and barons and dukes and nobles and knights would spend all their money to go on crusade. Why? Well, because knights especially, and kings and dukes, had a problem. This problem was that they were all very Catholic, they were all very religious, and the Bible, and their lifestyle was one of war and death, and I mean, they're knights, that's their job, that's their profession, is war. But the Bible doesn't take too kindly to war. It doesn't like murderers, and that's what knights were. And this was a big problem for kings and knights and the like. I'm a knight, that's what I do. How do I get to heaven? Because, well, there's some red tape there. Well, all of a sudden comes the Pope and says, yes, but if you murder in the name of God, if you take up this righteous crusade and bring your deadly skills to the heathens, well, then sure, you're murdering. Yeah, sure. But you're doing it in the Lord's name, and he'll let you into heaven. And to many knights and many kings and many dukes, this was a miracle. This is amazing. I get to be what I am, and I get to go to heaven? Oh, snap. Hails to the yizzle. Let's do it. What? It's going to take all my gold to raise an army and march them to a desert thousands of miles away? It's just gold. We're talking about my immortal soul here. And yes, people really did feel that strongly. Religion back then was not like religion is now for most people. Religion now is not that anyone's less passionate about it, but it's much more ethereal, much more spiritual, less literal than it was back then. Back then, if God were to reach out of the sky a giant hand and slap someone to death, most people would go, he really pissed God off. And that would have been it. Today, if that would have happened, people would be like, did you freaking see that? Holy crap, I shouldn't be saying that. But no, people really thought God was a much more tangible, this is a hard thing to say, because it's not that people don't think he's tangible, but they thought God had a much more direct role in society than most religious people do today. Most people think that God is more ethereal and out there. And people would, very much be concerned for their immortal souls and spend their entire wealth and the lives of all their peasants to ensure that they went to heaven. You can't say those wars were political in any way. They bankrupted half the countries that went on them. The countries lost gold, they lost manpower, they lost peasants who worked the field, they lost their own lives many of the times. And this was all done not for wealth or sometimes for glory, but not for wealth or the betterment of their country, but for the betterment of their immortal soul, which is a deeply personal thing and not political. So there are lots of examples of wars that are not politics by other means. So Clausewitz, I hesitate to say he was wrong. In his time, it made sense. He had a very limited scope. He had only his experiences to draw from. And in his experience, absolutely, you could probably say that, politics by other means. Yeah. But, so yeah. So history of warfare, 30 minutes and 34 seconds into the podcast when I said I was going to start it. I went off on a tangent again, didn't I? So, history of warfare. Well, first you should know that no matter how much people try to say war is an invention of man, it's not really true. Violence, most certainly, is not an invention of man. Violence has been around as long as there's been a food chain. A lot of people used to argue that organized warfare was an invention of man, and that's still technically not true. Jane Goodall proved that when she studied the chimpanzees, and many other people since then have studied chimpanzees. So chimpanzees in the wild practice in forms of organized warfare. Maybe not warfare, let's call it skirmishes, but the same principle and concept applies. They will constantly put together hunting parties, raiding parties, patrol parties, where they will patrol their territory in a group. They will see other groups and they will initiate skirmishes with those groups. Sometimes they're raiding parties, sometimes they're trying to scare them off, other times they're trying to outright kill them, but they have organized warfare or battles or skirmishes, whatever you want to call them. The concept is there. Organized skirmishes is not an invention of mankind. It's been there for a lot longer, if we are to believe what we're being told from the chimpanzees. So when did war really start? When can you say warfare really started? That's a tough call. Because what do you call war? I mean, when there were cavemen and one tribe would attack another tribe, do you call that a war? Do you call it a skirmish? Do you call it a battle? What do you call it? When does something stop being a skirmish and start being a battle? When does something stop being a battle and start being a war? And you might say, well, I would think a skirmish versus a battle is size. Okay, well, what's the size? I don't know. Let's say a few hundred people, that's a battle. Okay. When does a battle become a war? Well, if there's more than one battle. Well, what time period are we talking about? What if there's one battle every few years? Is that a war or is that an isolated event? What if there's more than one battle between two tribes of 20 people? Well, there's not enough of them to be called a battle. I guess there's skirmishes, but there's more than one skirmish, so is that a war? So it's a really hard thing to define of when war started. We know for a fact that organized fighting has been around since at least the time of Gilgamesh. Was it Gilgamesh? Was Gilgamesh the king? Gilgamesh was the king, right? Yeah, Gilgamesh. Because we have... now we have some cave paintings, I should address them. We have some cave paintings that might possibly point towards organized tactics of cavemen, but we're not sure on this. We are not positive. They might have organized tactics, they might not. It's just too hard to tell, so we're not sure. And what I mean by that is that cave paintings are really hard to read. I think what it is you had a line of 4 men and a line of 2 men and a line of 2 men to their side, and some people are like, that's a flanking maneuver, and other people are like, or it's a third party, or it's a dance, or it's 2 idiots that got lost. I mean, it could be a lot of things, so we're not sure. But it could have existed, flanking type tactics could have existed back in cave days. We don't know. The first real proof we have was in the time of Gilgamesh, the king Gilgamesh. If I'm getting the wrong king, forgive me, but it is in one of the first societies of what we would call societies in the history of the world. Samaria? I think. Oh gosh, I don't. Mesopotamia. Oh man, see, I'm horrible with the names and dates. I remember the events, and I remember most importantly the impact of them. But you asked me to remember the first country or the first society that we recognize, and I can't remember if it's Mesopotamia or Samaria, or one of those two. Mesopotamia, I think, actually was the area, the fertile area that it sprung out of. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, King Gilgamesh had a mural, a drawing, something, I forget. I think maybe it was made out of clay, or maybe it was sculpted, whatever the case may be. But it showed men in rank and file with armor and weapons. And when I mean by rank and file, I mean they were lined up with their shields overlapping, which is a battle formation. So we know since at least then there have been some forms of organized warfare. Okay, hang on. What am I doing here? I'm talking to you guys, and I'm forgetting to pay attention to where I'm going. The first real records we have of a battle, though, is all the way up in Egyptian time. The Egyptian Middle Kingdom, I believe, in about 3000 BC. Little rusty on the years, but I think so. And I think it was Pharaoh Ramses? Question mark? Again, names, dates elude me, but the important bits don't. The first testimony of battle that we have, the first person who actually wrote battle down, and this is important because before people could write, how could we have a testimony of how battle occurred, was an Egyptian emperor. He was a new emperor. I believe it was Ramses. He was a new emperor. He had just ascended the throne, and one of his kingdoms was rebelling. One of his uppity neighbors was getting all, well, uppity. And he was going to go put them down. And, wait, where am I going? Oh, well, I'm not going here. Okay. And we have an account. Now, it's not a very good account because, you know, the guy who wrote it didn't really dwell too much on the tactics. He's just kind of telling it more as a story. And obviously, as much as often is the case back then, he told it in a way that inflated Ramses. But we do know that in 3000 BC there was organized battle. Kind of organized. It wasn't what you think of when you think organized battle. It was more like everyone lines up, and he has chariots that are devastating. Oh my God, chariots were devastating back in the day. Chariots were the tanks of the ancient era. They were also like the first broadly manufactured and deployed weapon across the world. I mean, chariots were developed somewhere in China at some point. They weighed about 20 pounds, and they were very easy and quick to make, and they spread like wildfire. And so a bunch of people lined up, and chariots were on the pharaoh side. I don't think they were on the side of the city. He marched to a city, and he went to take this city. And the city's army marched out to meet him, and they exchanged words and blows, and the pharaoh's army slaughtered them. We don't know really how. It wasn't very detailed. I believe the chariots had a large role to play in it, but they routed the city's armies. But an interesting note, the Egyptian military did not have a lot of discipline. And we know this because after the army was routed, instead of following the army into the city before they could close the city gates, thus capturing the city all in one day, they stopped to loot the bodies. No matter how hard the Pharaoh drove them forward, they didn't care. They were there to loot the bodies. And the army retreated into the city, and they managed to close the gates, and Ramses had to siege them out, which back then was a long and difficult process. So we know that the Pharaoh's army was not disciplined, and at least that army had not developed the type of discipline that many armies were used to later on. Now, it's not to say that there weren't armies like that, in all periods of history, because they were. But we do know at least that this army did not have that kind of discipline. So yeah. Sorry, I just paused for a second. So the computer store already closed for some reason, so I guess I'm not going for a long drive today, which means that I don't have much time left. So anyway. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and stop there, actually, because I'm literally like a few minutes away from the house. Yes, and that was all the war that ever happened, ever. The end. There. I told you the history of warfare, and I don't want to hear anything about, but Squee, you just spent 40 minutes talking about World War I, which happened after the Egyptians. Nope. Nope. Didn't happen. You just misunderstood what I was saying. It's a common mistake. It's fine. Anyway, guys, ask me questions. Ask me questions so I can answer them. And I will. So I'll see you guys next time. All right. Ta-ta.